Worship is a volume business. Technical Boy, the new god of the internet. Now, American Gods concluded its first thrilling season just last night on June 18th, 2017. Now, as a historian, finding the many Easter eggs of religious mythology was thrilling to me on so many levels. Now, I have been enamored with American Gods since someone first suggested I watch the program on its home network, Stars. Now, I loved getting invested in the television dramas, but we all know it's difficult to commit the time and energy into a new show. But after the first season, however, I am thankful I became a disciple to the brewing battle between the old gods and the new. Now, this episode began with a return of one of my favorite deities, the bespoke trickster, Mr. Nancy, played by Orlando Jones. Now, Jones stole the show in his previous monologue during the Secret of the Spoons episode to the African slaves on a Dutch ship. Now, many have speculated he may be Loki. However, he represented West African animism in the forms of tigers and monkeys, and he's actually a deity known as Anansi. Now, the episode began with him tailoring suits. Spiders crawled throughout the threads. This is because the original Ashanti tales of the Trickster God, the West African deity Anansi, the ancient name for Mr. Nancy, the trickster, is both a spider and a man. Like Prometheus, he stole stories from the great sky god and gave them to the mortals down below. Now, he decided to practice his favorite pastime by recounting a story to Shadow and Wednesday from 864 BCE in the temple of Baran. He says, "Our queen's power, which is the power of all women, is the power of rebirth and creation." Now, the flashback sequence began under the light of a red moon. Red moons have existed as a part of mythology since the dawn of time, and they normally spell feasting time for the gods. Baran was no exception. Mr. Nancy described in great detail that kings rose up to challenge the goddess of femininity. All of them met the same fate as the hapless online date we saw Baran ingest in her divine lady parts. That was in the pilot episode. That was her backstory. Now, after her popularity had waned, Baran survived through the ages while still ingesting the love of others, mainly by asking them where the bathroom was located. It showed her in the 1970s, and she was in love with another woman. Now, at her partner's deathbed, the camera panned to a golden serpent bracelet around her partner's wrist. Now, the serpent has long been a mythic figure associated with male energy and dominance. The serpent cost Adam and Eve their innocence in the Garden of Eden. In the hospital, it also cost Baran her most precious treasure. And much like losing paradise, she lost her way in life as well. And then in 2013, Baran was shown to be living as a homeless woman. This was a gods to rags story. Now, she helplessly watched her old temple on television destroyed by ISIS. Again, some of the most notable religious misogynist of the modern era, and more male energy destroying her power. Now, after her temple fell, the internet arrived for a meeting. He handed her a phone, and it was preloaded with a dating profile. Now, he explained it was a new altar to replace her old. This explained why she was consuming new followers from an online dating app in the pilot episode. So we return to the present. We find Shadow and Wednesday discussing their plans for the upcoming battle. Now, Shadow was still shaken up by the death of Vulcan at the hands of Wednesday in the last episode we saw them. Wednesday explained to Shadow he was confused, not angry. Mr. Nancy seemed to like the anger in Shadow. "Angry gets shit done," Mr. Nancy said. Now, Shadow had another vision of the great tree and the creature with the flaming eyes. This is clearly a sign that he will play a major role in the Ragnarok or Armageddon to come. But after he woke up, we discovered that Mr. Nancy had designed a purple suit for Shadow. Now, purple is the color of royalty for the Ashanti people in Africa. Perhaps the royal color is a clue to Shadow's origins or greater importance. Then the episode took its most delightful turn when Shadow and Wednesday traveled to Kentucky to celebrate Easter. There they found a house full of Jesuses. Yes, I double-checked and found that Jesuses is the plural of Jesus. Now, all the sons of Yahweh had arrived to celebrate Easter with the goddess herself. I knew immediately when the pagan goddess of the holiday would be featured in this episode when I saw that Wednesday and Shadow passed bunnies on the road. Bunnies and eggs have long been symbols of reproduction, normally associated in paganism with the sacred feminine. Well, this episode perfectly highlights and makes a good joke out of the Christian hijacking of Easter. The Easter goddess is called Ostera by Wednesday, and this is because Ostera was the name of the spring goddess in Old German. She's also known as Eastor, Eastar, or simply Easter. The Jesuses represented all the different forms of the Christian Savior throughout the domination. Wednesday said that when certain believers closed their eyes and prayed, they all saw a certain form of the Christ. And one funny sight gag was when Jesus was holding handfuls of candy eggs that rapidly fell through Stigmata in his palms. Now, this may be construed as an error. Stigmata really occurs in the wrist. The wrist is the spot where men were nailed for crucifixion because the tendons in the hands can't support the weight of a man. However, I would say it's not an error because the image of the gods is based on belief. Wednesday makes it clear that gods exist because people believe in them, and how they picture the god determines their appearance. So since Stigmata is so commonly believed to be in the hands, it's actually more likely that Stigmata Jesus would have appeared that way as he was most commonly perceived. Now, Wednesday also had a hilarious moment when he told one of the Jesuses plainly, "It's her day, you took it." Now, to his credit, the Jesus seemed to feel really bad about the whole hijacked holiday, and I hope the script's direction read, "Jesus wept." I prefer to believe it did so based on American God's rules, that must be true. Now, I'm not going to spoil the endings of the episode, but we learned some startling facts about Lara Moon and the real circumstances behind her death. This only supported the notion that Shadow is highly important in the battle to come. "What do you think gods do?" Mad Sweeney said to Lara on the activities of gods. And speaking of gods, we saw the new gods arrive to confront the old gods at the Easter party. Now, Ostara had managed to stay young, powerful, and vibrant because her holiday is still celebrated so widely. However, Wednesday was quick to point out that she was forgotten, and no one in the modern world truly prayed to her anymore. Now, Ostara was Wednesday's trump card in the war with the new gods all along. She remained powerful even though the time for her worship had ended, and she demonstrated her power when she manifested her true form and created a blight over the Kentucky harvest. This was a plague of biblical proportions. The ground turned brown and the vegetation all dried up. Now, Wednesday revealed this had been his plan. The blight would remind people that the gods still held power over the seasons, and the people would resume praying to them once again. Wednesday manifested his true form as well. He finally told Shadow who he truly was, which should have been obvious at that point. Shadow claimed he read hundreds of books in prison, most of them on history. I'm surprised he never read any on Norse mythology. If he had, he would have known Wednesday revealed his true identity in their first encounter on the airplane. He had asked Shadow, "What day is it?" To which Shadow replied, "Wednesday." Well, Wednesday replied it was his day. And the days of the week are based off Norse deities. Wednesday is associated with Odin. Other names for Odin are also Wotan or Wutan, and his hammerman Zernabog constantly referred to him as the latter. Now, of course, we could forgive Shadow for being a tad busy and preoccupied to bother to look this up. He also had no access to the internet, as Wednesday precluded electronics during their travels, most likely to stay disconnected from the Technical Boy and Mr. World. Well, the final episode this season concluded with the gauntlet being thrown down between the old gods and the new. Mr. World made it clear to Wednesday, who has now revealed himself as Odin, that this would be the battle in which he would die. Personally, I'm thrilled for the upcoming battle next season. I both love and hate a cliffhanger, but it's an excellent display of writing when the reader and viewer is left wanting more. And as a historian, I'm also excited to find the minute references to mythology loaded into the next episodes. I'm looking forward to hunting more Easter eggs of mythological trivia with you all next season. Now, if you're a fan of history, check out my alternate history book with superheroes, Outbreak Mutiny. It's on sale on Amazon now in ebook and paperback.
Great disturbance in the force.